like to call to order the meeting of the Assembly Budget and Finance Committee, and we'll start with introductions.
Internal audit, Mike Chadwick.
Property appraisal, Brent Schlossman.
Lance Wilbur with OMB.
Robin Ward with real estate.
Alex Chakowski, maintenance and operations.
Richard Whitehead, Public Finance.
Elby Gray Johnson.
Tim Stevenson.
Amy Dombrowski.
And your name, sir?
Dave Van Care.
Hey, George.
And your name?
Rose Woolley, I believe I did.
Thank you. We don't have an agenda in front of us, but I think I can remember what's next. And I believe what's next is a report from the municipality on the financial. Thank you. Perfect. MOA financial status. Update on the 2016 budget. OMB Director. Lance?
Yes.
You have the
good.
floor.
As members of the Assembly know, we have finished our second public hearing. Public hearing is closed. There is a work session on Friday to look at Assembly amendments at 1 o'clock. We look forward to seeing those from the Assembly and see what we can do to accommodate some of those. We do, as a result of the public hearing and the actions to date, it looks like the proposed budget has about $185,000 in there for a little bit of wiggle room if you wanted to move that around. As a result of the fines and fees, we made some adjustments in there that added about $117,000 to that number. We also have some other department submissions that we'll include that'll probably, give us another $50,000 in savings in the S version. And then we're looking at one other opportunity that may afford us a couple $100,000 as well. So we're working on those in the S version. We have to work with departments to see if that's. So in the end, we may actually end up with about $500,000 instead of $185,000. So we'll share that with you as we move forward. We've not confirmed at this time. So that's kind of where we are with the budget. The administration's plans will be to we'll obviously attend the work session tomorrow, listen to what your requests are, see if we can accommodate those. We'll prepare our S version our plan is to prepare it by the 19th. We're working with the clerk to schedule a work session on the 20th to share our proposed S version for 1 hour. If the administration and the Assembly want to do that before your meeting on the 24th, and then we'll go forward. So.
Before you continue, Ms. Dombrowski had a question.
Thank you. I think the $185,000. I don't think you're taking into account though the change, the AO 116S, because we shortened the payback to the Police and Fire Medical Trust, which increased cost. Remember that?
I do.
So I think if my mind is serving me, I think it was like 189 is what I was told at the Assembly meeting.
187.
Oh, see, I was close. So just put that in your file cabinet.
Yeah, that will be part of our S.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Dombrowski. And if I can follow up on her comments, because I was thinking the same thing. So you hadn't taken into consideration what happened on Tuesday when you gave us this report, or have
So
you?
the 117 is part of the revenues, that's true. Ms. Dombrowski is correct. With the change in the extension for 187, that would consume basically the 186 that we have left over in it, so that's about a wash.
Thank you. So I'm going to cross that off my notes.
And then I know that the Assembly members, and I know this committee is interested in what the fund balance looks like. So once we make an accommodation to secure our policy requirements for the 10% for bonds, the 2% for emergency funding, reserve for TAPs, for those things we don't have, we're roughly looking at about $7 million in projected fund balance for 2016. And that's a combination of our projections for reduced expenditures. So we'll have some savings there in 2015. And then a projection on the additional revenues. And I'm going from the latest report we have from Treasury, which is September 30th, and that's roughly $3.5 million. So again, the mayor's budget does not include using any of that fund balance as part of his proposal. So the Assembly looks at that's the amount of money that would be available for.
I'm sorry, I was distracted. How much did you say? 7 million
Yes.
in fund balance?
Yes.
And that's after your set asides, or estimated?
Yes, projected. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Dombrowski. If I can make a comment, so it's $7 million uncommitted.
Correct.
Okay. And then you mentioned something about $3 million. Is that in addition to the $7 million?
No, I was.
All right, $7 million total uncommitted fund balance
Yes.
is what's anticipated. Okay.
Should.
I'd like to recognize Mr. Peterson for joining us today and Chairman Cheney. And I think, is there somebody on the phone?
Oh, Ms. Gray Jackson, I apologize. We did not have anyone that wanted to be on a telephone, and we didn't hear from anyone, and we needed the bridge for the Board of Ethics meeting, so I just disconnected the phone.
Okay, if I can just follow up, thank you, Ms. Jones, but I wasn't expecting anybody either. We just heard some fumbling. So that's the only reason why I made that comment, but thank you, Ms. Jones.
We were fumbling up in the Board of Ethics meeting. I apologize.
No problem. Okay, please continue, Mr. Wilbur.
So I think that's kind of where we are. We are receiving, Rose is being very judicious in sending us the Assembly's proposed amendments to date. And so we're working to prepare responses to those as fast as we can and as complete as we can. We still owe the Assembly, I think, responses to 3 issues from your previous work sessions. One of them is regarding SAP staffing. The other one is regarding a question from Mr. Flynn, which has to do how we are paying for the fire chief in Beardwood, split between EMS and area-wide. And the third item escapes me, Madam Chair. So
The third item was, 2 of them I think were for me. Well, the third was we just talked about, the lobbyist.
the lobbyists. Yeah, we have a question about our current lobbyist contracts and how much they are and what our status of those is, so we'll be preparing a response for those as well. All our responses from the OMB will be going through Rose and then to you as fast as we can.
If I can follow up, is the question referring to our lobbyists in DC and in Juneau?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bosky?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm trying to understand the process that's happening now. So we were asked to submit all of our amendments by this morning at 8 a.m., which I can tell you, Madam Chair, not all 9 are in. A number of them are, but I was waiting for answers from the administration to finish a couple of them. So we have a couple stragglers, but it won't be a lot. So my expectation was we present ours at the meeting tomorrow and we give our rationale, and then we'll get administration response? Or are you anticipating giving administration response before you hear the rationale?
You're not going to respond before we get them all.
Okay. There's one thing I just want to be on the record saying, I don't want my amendment saying administration agrees or disagrees on it. I want you to hear me first. Keep an open mind. And then, either shoot it down or not later, but let's have a conversation first.
Absolutely, Mr. Bowski. That's exactly our plan. We want to get them in totality before we respond to any of them.
Right, and if I could comment on that process, that's exactly the process that I've agreed to with our budget analyst. So, anyway. Okay, anything else, Mr. Wilbur?
Just one more final comment. I know that.
And before you continue, I'm sorry, I forgot Mr. Steele had a question.
No, that's all.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
I just want to let the Assembly members know that we turned in our budget to actuals, and the Assembly reviewed those. Just as a reminder, as of the end of September, we were 74.8%, roughly 75% through the end of the year. Our percent of budget expended is 2.6% under our budget, and then if we consider the encumbrances that we made but hadn't paid, we're about 0.3% over. So, those are commitments we have, and so while some departments may be a little bit over in the non-labor, it's just that time of year where grants are paid, leases are paid, contracts are paid, so that's why those 3 or 4 departments are running hot at this time of the year.
Understood. Mr. Training?
That's, we have to do everything we need encumbered for SAP.
I don't know.
Because I'd like to get it all encumbered now before the end of the year for SAP, so we've got all the modules and everything we need.
I don't know. I refer to all of it.
Mr. Bosky? Thank you, Mr. Training. Mr. Bosky?
My understanding is the administration's in negotiations with SAP on the fixed fee contract, and they weren't releasing, when I asked at the last work session, they weren't releasing how much, they didn't want to tip off the hand.
They didn't want to tip off the hand.
Yeah, so
I
maybe I missed it, but I don't see that appropriation in the capital budget.
You don't.
Did
the
I
budget-
miss it?
You are correct. It is not.
Yeah, so it's not, and I mean, it's
SAP
probably,
neutral.
yeah, it's probably
Pretty
going
much.
to be a significant fiscal note, but it's not there yet, that I saw.
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. Anything else, Mr. Wilbur? Okay, thank you for your presentation. Okay, next on the agenda is a presentation from the administration concerning Bering Street Fleet Maintenance Facility lease. And whoever's going to lead the discussion, please begin. Thank you.
I'll let Robin hand out the document.
Thank you, Robin.
At the end of 2015, our current leases are up for the Bering Street Maintenance Facility, and that's what handles about 80% of our maintenance operations. And what we've looked at is over the last 15 years, this property was sold, and then we leased it back. And over the last 15 years, we looked at many different options, whether we buy new other facilities and renovate and make them maintenance facilities. We looked at building facilities. We looked at purchasing properties. And then part of the land deals that happened, we reserved, and I shouldn't say reserved, but we set aside about $2 million for the eventual either purchase or doing something with some properties. Well, this time, we've reached out to the owners of the facility, and they are amenable to sell it. And I had Real Estate Services, Tammy and Robin, run all the numbers, and basically, we can purchase the property today at $3.75 million. And that would give us sustainable operations for our fleet maintenance facilities for the duration. The building has been used for a maintenance facility for basically 30 plus years. We've been in there. And then, one of the biggest things that we looked at, if we were to walk away from this property and the owners decided to do something else with it, we are on the hook for any environmental issues that may be on the property. And we don't know what those are at this time. It's been used as a maintenance facility back since the mid-'70s that we're aware of, maybe even longer than that. So. It's just, to me, the numbers work. I've looked at this hard and fast. I think the numbers work. It's a good business decision. Basically, what we would pay for in leases over the next 10 years is the purchase price of the facility.
Mr. Steele, I'm sorry to interrupt. Mr. Steele has a question.
Yeah, are there major maintenance issues that need to be done once we acquire the property? You talked about the $3 million as a cost to acquire. Are there other things? Is there a new roof? Is there lighting?
There will be a new roof required sometime in the near future. We've done some patches on it over the last few years. We've run some numbers. It's not a huge facility, so the costs aren't insane. I think we're probably looking at probably in the $400,000 to $500,000 price to redo the roof over some time. I think there's still a few years life left in it. We'll do what we can to make it extend. That's what we've been doing for the last several years.
And you have plenty of space with the vehicles out of it.
That is correct. With the light duty shop moving, it gives us enough room to function. It meets the requirements that were identified in the CH2M Hill of the overcrowding of the facility. So it does help us immensely. It also leaves us the option maybe even take on some other work for other departments in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Before I go to Mr. Bosky, I'm just going to call you Ski because your last name is too hard to pronounce. We have this PowerPoint presentation in front of us, and it doesn't seem like you're following it, but I really would appreciate it if you did to some extent, because there's a lot of information in here that we need to hear. And before you continue, Mr. Bosky.
I'll let him go through his presentation because I know one of my answers is in here because I flipped ahead to the funding source. I was going to ask Robin about, so I'll just wait.
I was going to ask the same question, Mr. Bosky. Mr. Trainee?
No.
Okay, please continue.
Okay, if we go to basically, I was giving you the background of the where we're at. The history of this property was sold in 2001 in a multi-parcel exchange with JLS Properties, and since then we've owned since then we had leased back with 3 different 5-year leases, and basically it's a maintenance facility for our entire fleet operation. If you look at the lease rates, which are on page 4, I believe, it shows what we've spent.
Would you like to talk about it? We're not gonna read it. I prefer that you talk about it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
basically we started out paying at 38 cents a square foot, and currently when we get into 2016, we've had 3 contract amendments, 3 different lease extensions for the 5-year periods, and then you see we started out paying $124 a year in 2001, and in 2015 with property taxes it's $262, roughly $263.
Maybe I could just give you a little background. This is a triple net lease, which means that we pay rent, we also pay the property taxes, we pay the insurance, and we pay the maintenance. Therefore, the landlord pays nothing whatsoever. We pay basically everything for a reduced square footage price.
Just like City Hall, Mr.
And that's the
Trainee.
same thing in City Hall. You're on the same spot.
Here we are. Okay. Mr. Steele?
Yes, if I may. So you save on the, if we purchase, you save on the taxes, but you lose it overall. I mean, you don't have to pay it, but then you're not getting, the municipality is not getting the taxes.
Well, you lose the taxpayer, sir, but you don't actually lose the revenue. Frankly, then it gets spread out by the other taxpayers. So you don't lose the revenue, but the municipality as a taxpayer would not pay the taxes. That's correct.
Please continue.
Yeah, and over time, we've looked at several different alternatives. Since 2004, since I became the director, we looked at purchasing property adjacent to Chugach Electric and design. We actually went through the process of conceptually designing a new facility there. The funding was not available. And then in 2011, we looked at purchasing there's a trucking warehouse that's adjacent to the railroad crossing and the new bridge. We looked at that. The cost to convert that warehouse into a maintenance facility by the time we purchased. The purchase price was basically the same price of a fully functional facility, and we were going to have to put about $8 or9 million in the building to make it work. It lacked lighting, lacked a sewer line, a ton of stuff. And then in 2012, we looked at a building over adjacent to MLMP. It used to be a bus maintenance facility there. We looked at that, and it just didn't pencil out with the amount of work that would be required to make it a true maintenance facility, add cranes and stuff of that nature. Just didn't pencil out. And then in 2013, we purchased the building on Fairbanks Street, and that's our light duty function is moving there. We're just about ready to do that. We're a little bit, we're just waiting on some lifts to be installed, and we'll be moving there in the next week or 2. Or start moving over, and that'll happen. And then when all this happens, we move to the light duty shop. That will contain the entire light duty function, tires, everything in one building. And that's what frees up the space at the Bering Street facility. It gives us about a 27% increase in space, which eliminates the overcrowding. And if you've ever been to Bering Street, which several of you have with me, the whole police car function, whereas eats up a lot of real estate, will move over to the tire shop in the adjacent lot, which frees up the space for the heavy equipment side of things. And then if you look at the projected lease rates, I think this is what sells the concept. In 2016, the lease rate would be $280 with a 3% annual increases. And if you look to the right, by 2019, we'd be at roughly $360,000 a year for the price, including the taxes. That doesn't count all the maintenance we would still have to perform on the building, so which is, it just costs money to maintain a building that size. And then over the 10-year period, it's basically $3.8 million, roughly, just about what the price is. One of the things that I will tell you is that over the years, we've tried to do some things to help us in the facility. We've added some LED lighting. And that was internally for us to reduce energy costs. So we've spent some money in the building. We've added cranes that were required for operational needs. So, you know, one of the other things we looked at on several occasions, if we were to find a place to move to, just the cost to move is about probably in the $150,000 to $200,000 range, just all the equipment we would have to move. And there's never a perfect fit. So if we move the tenant improvements for electrical and environmental issues and stuff we would have to do, we could run into several $100,000. So as far as from an operational standpoint, it makes sense for us to purchase this facility and have a long-term solution for our operations.
Anything else?
Nothing else from me.
Ms. Dombowski?
Thank you. Robin, what, do you know what the balance is in the assets fleet fund? I don't even know what fund number that is.
I can give you, currently it's roughly around $6 million. We're working on a spreadsheet with the financial folks, and we plan on making that available to you.
Okay, I'm just not even familiar with which fund that is.
It's the 606 fund, I
Okay.
believe.
607?
606.
606?
So,
That must be
it's the
the
capital
number,
fund, I
doesn't it?
believe, yes.
Oh, okay.
The only other comments that I make is, you know, I've said it before, I know, too bad we sold it to begin with. Now we're just buying it back. I've been over to the place, and I think when Ski made the comment about the water lines going into these places, whenever you have a shop like this, there has to be a certain size water line, all that kind of stuff. And I think the infrastructure costs alone, in order to adequately address a shop like this, I think you're being generous when you say hundreds of thousands. I think it could be more.
It could be, it just depends on which
The
building you
location.
chose, correct?
Yeah, so, you know, considering the payback over of the expenditure is probably gonna be over the course of, you said 8 years-ish? 10 years.
Take 10 years.
10 years, let's just say 10 years. I think long-term planning, this is probably a good buy. So, from what I've heard, you know, this is something that I thought was a good idea for a while, so.
And if I may, we looked at, back in 2006, of building a new maintenance facility, and the prices range between 11 and 14 million for the same exact space.
That's what I was kind of referring to, because we talked about it when we did our tour. The last question I have is the gentleman that got his arm trapped in the lift over there, how's he doing?
He's doing okay. He is medically retired. He no longer works for us because he couldn't get 100% function back out of his arm. Very unfortunate.
I was just thinking about him, so.
Thank you, Mr. Dombowski. I have a couple of questions, if nobody else does. Okay, so what's the assessed value of the building?
The assessed value right now is, combined is $3,264,000. Now,
Okay.
that's the two parcels combined.
So my follow-up question is, then why are we paying 3.7?
I knew you'd ask that, so I prepared.
Good. Go, Robin.
My first, many times, assessed value is slightly less than fair market value. So the first purchase price that I offered them was 3.5, which is about 7.3% higher than the assessed value. So it was, you know, $3,500,000. I fully expected they would come back with somewhere around $4 million based on the cap rate, because I know that they're looking at this as a investment with a cap rate. So I fully expected they'd come back with somewhere around 8% cap rate. I was very pleased when they actually came back at 7.5% cap rate, which I thought was very reasonable. It's kind of mid-range for what an industrial property is. So I fully expected they would come back closer to $4 million, and they had even mentioned 4 to 4.2 before. So when they came back at $3,750,000, we felt like that was very reasonable. And I've since done quite a bit of research on what the standard cap rates are and so on, and I think it's more than reasonable. I believe that they are as motivated to sell as we are to buy at the moment. I think that they're looking at redistributing their investment somewhere else. I was surprised that they were actually that reasonable.
And I just have a couple of comments, okay? The comment is, under a prior administration, not the last, that administration was really successful in getting residential assessed values on the municipality's book to market value. But they didn't do a very good job getting commercial properties to market value. And so I still think there's a lot of work, and this is to you, Brent, a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of the municipality working on getting commercial properties to market value as was done with residential properties. So with that said, I think that it's the right thing to do personally. And I'd like to ask this committee, before we move on, if this committee is ready to make a recommendation to the rest of our colleagues. Because
Madam Chair, I would move to make a recommendation that we approve this purchase as presented.
I'll second it.
thank you, Mr. Bosky, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does everybody agree?
I agree. You know, it's a shame we didn't, obviously, everybody said there had done it earlier. And this gives a little bit of room, I think, for expansion in terms of parks could go anywhere, I suspect, or it could be in an outbuilding or something. Also, which could give you more space should you ever need it. But it's a great location, centrally located, good access.
Okay, and I just want to thank you for your presentation. You don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting unless you just
Madam
want to
Chair,
hang out with us.
I think
Mr.
Mr.
Bosky.
Peterson had a comment.
Mr. Peterson?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I was just going to say that I agree with my colleagues. I think it's always better to buy if you can afford to buy rather than rent or lease. And so 10 years from now, I guess we'll be the owner of this building, and that'll probably be a good one.
Well, that's not a true statement. We have the funds to purchase it out.
We'll be owners sooner, but we'll have the initial cost paid off in 10 years.
Oh, okay.
You'll have the savings.
Yeah, exactly. We'll capture that.
Okay, thank you to the committee for making that recommendation. It's certainly going to make things go a lot smoother when we have this item on the floor. Is it going to be on the 24th agenda, November 24th?
Yes, it will be introduced on the
For
24th.
introduction in the public hearing.
Yes.
Excellent, thank
Yes,
you.
That's our.
Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is fire sprinkler exemption. We've been talking about this exemption for quite some time now, and the latest was a recommendation that Mr. Bosky had, and it was to talk about what's the possibility of a 10-year limitation. And we know that the state's involved, but our meeting from last month was canceled because of parking space issues. But I'd like to hear some thoughts from you, Brent, on this subject.
Again, it is a state statute that requires the exemption. I think we gave you some paperwork about 6 months ago, June maybe, on the costs. We had some examples of several buildings and what the payback cost on it is. Basically, by limiting it 10 years, it would cost, I think I looked at Walmart, it's $400,000 or $500,000 to put in the sprinkler system when they built the building, that portion of it. In 10 years, they would pay back much less. So you're asking, but the law can do whatever the law does, but what they're doing is investing $500,000, and the exemption would pay them back somewhat, quite a bit less than half of what that's.
If it was limited.
Right, it was limited, which is fine. I mean, that's however you want to do that. We have no problem with tracking that. I don't believe we'll have to have a little bit of tracking, but it's very doable on our side to track it and then cut it off for 10 years if that's the way the law is.
Would you be able to track it with that old comma system? Because
It's
that
not-
was the question.
It presents some problems. We'd have to do some programming, and I couldn't even tell you how much that would cost, but for by our own people. But we track other things, and even if it's just a matter of spreadsheets to track it, and every year look at which ones are dropping off, we could do it that way if we had to. It would be better to do it within the CAMA system, and that would take programming for the current system or a new system that built in, which would be our.
Mr. Bosky?
I was gonna say, I bet a new system would be your preference. I think you have to wait till after SAP though, I hate to tell you that. I think, I still am a fan of the 10-year because I think the intent is to let people capture the cost of implementing it, but I don't think it's an exemption that should go into perpetuity. I don't really see the need for that. I don't think that was the intent. So I personally still support giving it a specific window of time and a reasonable one so people could recapture their costs. And the other question I was going to have, I should know this, but I don't. How many properties do we have about that have this exemption?
In June, we have have that here. There are approximately 1,243 parcels that we have noted in Camden have sprinklers. There are
Okay.
probably more than that, that have sprinklers, but we haven't been inside them to track that. So 1,200 and about 825 as of June have exemptions on them.
So 825 have exemptions. Have
Right.
you done any calculation of the potential fiscal note attached to having the exemption drop off after 10 years?
No, we haven't as the 10-year. Again, that wouldn't pay them back for the cost of putting in the system. 10 years based on a 2% of building value typically is, I think that actually, yeah, on the Walmart in Midtown, the payback right now, the exempt amount on that building is $232,000 multiplied by the mill rate. That's about $3,400 in saving per year. Take that on in the future.
So you said $3,400 or $34,000?
$3,400 of tax savings.
Okay, and so I guess I do look at, I didn't articulate, I do look at it differently. I mean, some commercial buildings have to be sprinkled, right?
Some do, there's as you heard from the
Right.
fire department, it's not a
Guaranteed.
set, this type of building always needs a sprinkler. They go through a formula.
I still, and I don't know what the sweet spot is, whether it's 10 years or 15 years or whatever, but I don't see giving somebody the exemption forever. I just don't see it.
Thank you, Mr. Lasky. Mr. Steele?
Yeah, I think you were probably there when I expressed an opinion earlier, but it seems to me if it's required by code, there isn't really a need for an incentive. But the fact that they can write off a portion of it is certainly advantageous to them, and I'm not against that. They also get a benefit in terms of insurance, I presume, and that's one that we don't give them, but it certainly would be factored in by them. So I think that 10 years is a reasonable period of time. That's what I was trying to get at, and we've got them in there, and I don't know that we've ever shut them off. So some of those are probably more than 10 years old at the moment.
Quite a few of them.
Yeah. But I think it's a benefit that we don't have to give. If they're required by code, they do it anyway. And it's certainly to their advantage to save the property.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and what I was going to ask you to say was along the same lines as what Mr. Steele was just talking about, because the committee had discussed at a previous meeting, we've been batting this topic around for a fair amount of time now, about no exemption for properties that are required to have sprinklers when you build. And I don't know what the rest of the committee thinks about that, but I think if they're required by law to have a sprinkler, they shouldn't be able to get a tax deferment or tax reduction for that, in my opinion. I don't know, what does everyone else think?
I'm going to comment as soon as Mr. Training's done. Mr. Peterson, anything else?
I'm finished, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Training.
Thank you, Ellie. I think it's a factor of state law. So we'd have to find out if we can even stop it, because I think last time I looked, the state mandates that we have to give it. So we need to have legal take a look at it. What's the process to remove it? We probably have to go to Juneau. And what's interesting is this time of the year, Juneau's going to be desperately trying to figure out how to save money, as all the cities are. So it may be a good time for us to get this one lifted, or at least put a cap on it locally, decide what the cap would be. But let's have our legal take a look at it, because I think last time we looked at this, you can't end it because the state says you have to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Training. Before I make my comments, I'm going to go to you, Mr. Boss, but I just want to address what Chairman Training just said, and he's absolutely right. And I think that we're all aware of that, but at the committee level, I want to but determine how this committee feels. And then if this committee feels that this is something that we should ask the state to look in, then we can add it to our legislative program. Thank you, Mr. Training. Mr. Dombowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Mr. Steele makes a very valid point. I think when we're looking at this in context of offset of cost, if we're considering the property tax benefit and the insurance benefit, I think 10 years years is an appropriate window. I also, sorry, I'm a little tired
That's okay.
this afternoon, so I can't think straight. Mr. Peterson, what did you say? You said, oh, the required ones.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Peterson, and, yeah, you're the one who said it. I can't keep it straight. But if it's required by operation of code, I mean, I don't see why we're giving them an exemption.
Anything else, Mr. Moss?
No, and I was just, well, yes, I agree with you. I mean, I'm ready at this point to make a recommendation that the committee support the concept of going forward in the legislative arena to try to amend state code to allow the exemption to expire after 10 years, and exemptions that are required by operation of municipal code are not eligible for the exemption.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. Mr.
Yeah,
Steele?
just quickly, it seems to me when that was put into law, it was 80-something, 89, 88, or something like that, if I recall properly. The purpose was public safety. The purpose was to get sprinklers in those buildings to protect the public, and as a spinoff, perhaps protect the owner. But over the years, things have changed, and we've made a requirement here, there, or they have made it a requirement here, there, and everywhere to have sprinklers in certain types of structures. And I think that's all good. So the 10 years is a good write-off. It's still advantageous, I suspect, to the people who have that benefit, and I suspect the state would view positively our arguments.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Let me just quickly recognize our controller who joined us, Tom. Thank you for being here. Mr. Trady, did you have your hand up? No. Okay, so I'd like to make some comments. I agree with the comments that were made by committee members here 100%, because number one, it is to protect the public, but it's also protecting their investment. And so I'm ready and willing to have our attorney draft a legislative intent document to be included with our legislative program for this session. I'm ready to do that. So, Ms. Dabowski, do you want to make?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I move that the committee supports legislative language to be included in our legislative packet to limit sprinkler exemptions, or to encourage the state of Alaska to change the sprinkler exemption law to limit exemptions to 10 years. And if, I don't know, should we make it so it's optional for each municipality?
I think so.
So, okay, so give the option of limiting
Right.
the exemption to 10 years to offset. And additionally, those properties that are required by municipal code to have sprinklers are not eligible for the sprinkler exemption. That's my motion.
I'd second that.
Thank you. Does everybody agree? Okay, excellent. And I think,
Wasn't
no,
a very
that's
articulate
great.
motion.
No, you were, and Rose is taking some really good notes. And I'm glad that you made an option on. The bottom line is, even if and when the state does do that, we'll still have to do something at the local level.
Sure.
And have a public hearing and all of the above. So thank you. That was really
Madam Chair, if I may?
certain.
The only other thing I would say is I'm more than happy to, I think we should divide and conquer and make the effort to contact other municipalities around the state so they understand what we're doing. So when we get it there, they don't all of a sudden say, no, we don't want it. And I think by leaving it optional to each municipality, I think we'll not have opposition.
No, that's a good idea, Ms. Zimbowski, and that's being proactive instead of reactive. And our budget analyst has a comment.
Currently, the sprinkler exemption is in required exemptions. There's another section of statute following that that's optional exemptions. So it may make sense to look at moving it to the optional exemption. So areas that don't have building code can still require that.
Thank you. And I think that's a really good idea to let
I
other
think that fits into our motion.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And it's a good idea to somehow contact other municipalities. And I think we can just do that with a press release or something and send it out.
Yeah.
So we'll figure that one out. Mr. Peterson?
Isn't there an AML convention coming up real soon?
Right.
Might be mentioned at that.
Next week.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, we can talk about it there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would say even if we look at the big ones, Fairbanks, Matsuboro, Juneau, if we just pick the 5 biggest ones and each of us call somebody.
And if I can follow up on your comments, Mr. Bosky, I'm glad that whoever mentioned that, did you mention that?
That's a good idea.
Conference is next week, because it'll be really easy to let folks know at that level.
Madam Chair, I think since you're the chair, we'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. As a matter of fact,
If you'd be okay with it.
I'm doing a presentation during the lunch meeting, and I can mention it.
Perfect.
So Rose will give me some comments to make on that, in that regard, to help me out, and I'll mention it during my presentation on Nashville City. Okay? All right, we're down to report from the Budget Advisory Commission, and Ms. Nelson was gonna be here for a short period of time, but she isn't, so it looks like something came up. So we'll skip that. Any other comments from anybody before we go to audience participation? Mr. Bosky?
Madam Chair, it's not often we get a student in our committee meeting, and I'm sure that the budget issues are just very exciting. So if it's possible, I'd like to hear what grade he's in and what school he goes to.
I go to a charter school.
Which one?
Which one?
County Partnership.
Oh, nice. Great. Well, welcome. Did you learn anything today?
Yeah.
All kinds of good stuff.
Yeah, a bunch of stuff.
Wonderful. If I may just follow up with a couple questions, where do you live?
I live over by Kidney Park.
Okay, so do you know who your assembly representatives are?
I do not.
Okay, so that would be West Anchorage. So one of them is right here. His name's Tim Steele. You have 2 from your area, and the other is Ernie Hall. So yeah, welcome.
And your offices are over, the school offices are over on Arctic.
Yes.
And I did go to one of the graduations way back when, because of the library, I think.
Your school board days.
How are we doing, Ally? How are we doing?
That's awesome.
Let's go.
Well, we have, is this your first community meeting?
Yeah.
There's a lot. There's many different options. So the assembly has 11 members. Mr. Trainey's the chair of the assembly, and Ms. Gray Jackson is the vice chair of the assembly, but she's the chair of this committee. So we have committees for each different topic. We have some for public safety. This is a budget committee, obviously. And we have ones for development. We have all kinds of different committees. So that's how we kind of parse up our work. When we have complicated topics, it comes to the committee and we talk it out here, and then we explain it to the rest of the body. Kind of. But there's also community council meetings you can go to, and that's where local residents from your neighborhood get together and talk about the issues that are important to them. And in our city code, it's kind of like our constitution for the city, our charter. Community councils are actually established in charter. So they have a place, and they're supposed to advise the assembly and the mayor on issues that are important to them. So I would recommend that you go to a website called the Federation of Community Councils, and you can find your community. It's called FCC.
It's called Sandy Lake
Yeah.
Community Council.
Yeah. So if you just Google Sand Lake Community Council, you'll see when their meeting is, and then that's a great place to go and hear the topics that are directly in your neighborhood that they're talking about. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. We've had other students attend our meetings, which is highly unusual, but it's really, really great. So, Mr. Bosky, you did such a wonderful job. We're going to put you on the agenda for the next meeting to do a little
Student orientation.
No, that was really great. Thank you. Okay, so audience participation. Anybody have anything you want to say or tell us? Mr. Peterson?
I just had one additional comment as co-chair of the legislating committee. I'll be more than happy to talk to the legislators when I'm down there about changing the way that we deal with the fire sprinkler exemption, and hopefully we can move that forward. They're going to be real busy talking about budgets, but they might be more than happy to talk about anything but budgets at some point, I would imagine.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Trainey?
Just we've got to make sure we start to put this year's legislative package together. It gets through the assembly, so we can actually take it down to Juneau as part of the Anchorage legislative package. I appreciate this committee doing it, but we've now got to take it to the whole assembly and then go forward from there.
Thank you, Mr. Trainey. Mr. Bosky?
When is the legislative packet before us?
We're
December?
probably December before the year's up, yeah.
I think, and I mentioned it at the assembly meeting, but I do have a meeting set up next week with legislators. One specifically, she's the legislator in the House that carried the state's marijuana stuff. So I'm gonna bring our spice ordinance to her and kind of get her hooked up with Seneca and see if the state can go back and readdress the spice issue. Because I think, as we've done, like Mr. Trainee said, we kind of have led them as to, hey, this is working for us now. So I think it'll be a pretty easy fix. And
Appreciate you doing that, because we have a majority of the population of the state here,
Yeah.
and we work faster, as you know, than Juneau ever can.
And I will find out who on the Senate side carried it too, and I'll kind of help. I know I'm not on public safety, but I have pretty good.
We're all on it.
I'm pretty good friends with some of them. So, and the other thing I would just like to put on your radar, the Community and Economic Development Committee was going to be talking about it, but we bumped it because we have to deal with the marijuana ordinance coming up on the 18th. But I have been working with the governor's office and talking about potential changes relating to economic development, specifically deteriorated properties. In state code or state law, there's only specific, you have to articulate a specific area in order to give a broad-based exemption. I want them to give the option, just like we did with sprinklers, for municipalities to tailor their own. So I kind of wanted to break it open a little bit to give us the option. One of the things when we're walking into a potential economic downturn, one of the things that staves that off is economic development. So if we can come up with either abatement ways to deal with these issues, kind of like we did the 4th Avenue Theater or the Fairview District, if we can broaden that, I think if we can spur economic development, it'll help offset the revenue hits that we're all anticipating we're going to take. But it will take changes to state code to do that. It's going to take changes to municipal code too. But I've been working with the governor's office, and there's a potential that they might have an area where they have funding available where they can extend low interest loans to developers. So it's kind of a 3-part, and I haven't really told everybody on the development committee what I've alluded to what I've been working on with them. But it's very exciting. But it's again one of those things that since it's a budget issue, I think it would be helpful if both committees kind of, once we have it together more, knew about the topic. So when we talk to our legislators, we can all say, hey, you know what, this is a good option. It's another tool in our toolbox. So it's one of those things I just kind of put on your radar in case you know more about tax increment financing than I do, which is probably likely. So
That's great work. Thank you, Mr. Bosky. And there are others who go to Juneau. Mr. Chairman Trainee and I are 2 of them. And we go every year and bring constituents, and we won't have to bring anybody this year because nobody's getting anything. But we'll talk about things that we'd like to see happen. If there are no other comments,
Here's my page for this.
adjourn.